We talked a few moments ago about systems authorization. That is the approval by management for this change to a system or for this new system to go into production. When we do systems authorization, management is explicitly, knowingly accepting the risk. What could this new system do to the business? Now, in order for management to make that decision and accept that risk, we need to have a process of testing and review. And this is often not going to be good enough if the testing and review is only being done by the developers who built the system. So we have a process we hear called certification. Review of the functionality and security of a system with the purpose of providing management with assurance of compliance with standards and reliability. Now, so what do? We have a third-party group, the certifiers, or sometimes called security control assessors, actually review to make sure that everything that was required and documented in the design has been done, so that management knows whether or not our system is compliant with the security requirements and certainly the levels of reliability needed for our system to run. Now, so what does this do? This ensures that our systems are implemented correctly. They've configured all of the various elements and functionalities there. It's going to operate as intended. Now, this is where auditors often fall down because they do these first two things really well. They make sure the functionality is there and they make sure it's working. But very often they miss this third one, and that is producing the desired result. For example, an organization may have a contract to put in a new firewall. And putting in that new firewall, they make sure that when the auditor reviews the project, yes, the firewall was put there correctly. Number two, they test the firewall to make sure it's operating as intended. In other words, it lets good data through but blocks bad data. So we could say, well, isn't that enough? Well, not really. Because the point is, as we talked about before, the difference between verification and validation. These first two steps were verification. The firewall's there and the firewall's working correctly. Validation is to make sure it was the right control. Are we doing the right thing? Now, in the case of the firewall, this is especially important and an easy example to understand. A firewall is there to protect traffic going from one network to another. Did I put the firewall in the right place? Was the firewall the ideal solution? This is where we ensure when we do our testing that not only is that security control there and working correctly, but also that it is actually mitigating the risk. That firewall was put there for a specific reason. And we want to make sure that we have now mitigated that risk or that reason why the firewall is there. If I put the firewall in the wrong place, so it's not actually addressing the risk, then it doesn't matter if the firewall was implemented correctly and operating as intended. It still is not producing the desired result. The next step, based on then certification, is the step that's, well, quite often today called systems authorization, or used to be called accreditation. The accreditation is based on the results of the tests and reviews done by the security control assessors to make sure that all of the controls were implemented correctly, operating as intended, and producing the desired result. Now, management has to make a decision whether or not to approve this system to go into production. This is then the authorization. We can say that the system can be deployed and implemented. In doing this, management explicitly accepts the risk associated with this system operation. And based, of course, on then the implementation of an agreed on set of security controls. Very often the authorization will have limitations. The authorization may say this system is allowed to operate under these conditions or in this geographic location. This system is allowed to work based with this, should we say, functionality. But this is where we need to ensure that the authorization that was granted is what actually is being enforced when the system is in production. And that we don't have a situation where management said, this system is allowed to operate but only under these conditions, only to find that unfortunately those conditions were not then being followed when the system was implemented. Once a system has gone into production, we should do a careful analysis, a post-implementation review. The purpose of this is to gain feedback from the users, gain feedback from the developers, the testers, so we understand what about this project really went well, and what are the things we could have improved. So in doing this sober and careful self-reflection, we can provide management with assurance that we've built a system that meets the user requirements, that it is then properly configured and being operated in a secure way, and that we have plans in place specifically to resolve any outstanding issues. We know that by the time a system goes into production, there are probably a few little things we've found that we've not yet fixed, and those will go then into a list of the outstanding issues that can be fixed in the next release or next improvement to the project. We also have to then do a cost-benefit realization. Back in the initial feasibility studies, we put a proposal before management and said, this system is going to save you such and such an amount of money. Well, now the real question is, of course, did it actually do that? Did we realize the benefits that were promised during the feasibility? From every project, we can learn. We can learn how to get better at defining requirements, better at design, better at development and testing, and certainly better at rolling out or implementing the change. It's important for all of us that we then seek out what lessons can be learned so we can then apply them to future projects.